Welcome to Everything Health, produced by the A. Philip Randolph Institute. This evening, we'll be discussing healthcare in America. So please sit back and enjoy, and at any time during the show, you can post a question by simply using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your Zoom application. And your question could be featured during our Q&A segment later in the show. Once again, welcome, and sit back and enjoy as we start the show.
Well, my goodness, there we all are. Whew. Another Wednesday, another opportunity to get some good information from all of these experts that are out there. Welcome, Miss Gaskin Nathan, to the show, please, everybody. I am starting right with her name before even saying to those who are joining for the first time that I'm Cleola Brown. I have the pleasure of sitting in this chair and soaking up all the information that all of these experts like Ms. Gaskin Nathan has for us. I tell you this evening, our guest is the founder and CEO of Zila LLC, and she's also faculty and clinical supervisor at Pacific College of Health Science in New York. Through her work as a consultant, as an educator, as a healing artist, and a licensed massage therapist, she engages individuals and organizations through program development and implementation, facilitation, ritual wellness practices, and wellness space curation. Now, that's a whole lot of words in that one sentence and one paragraph. But what we're going to have an opportunity to do tonight is to hear from the person's own perspective what all of that means. But she's had more than 20 years of experience. Her focus is individual and community health and wellness across a social justice liberation framework. Her work is with both youth and adults, connecting Black, communities of color, and LGBTQIA in an integrative, see, I'm from South Carolina, y'all put the big words on me, in an integrative health approach, which sees the importance of holistic wellness with a focus on loving Blackness and working with LGBTQIA plus communities of color. Sister Carla, I am so excited to have you here. But let's thank you, first of all, for being in the hitter's box. As Dr. Tony could not make it with us tonight because she's doing exactly what you preach. She is taking care of her health first. And you're the only one that I know that has been able to make her slow it down and do exactly that. But thank you so much. And we are looking forward to hearing more about your work, especially how it connects spirituality and health. Please join me, APRI family, in welcoming Sister Carla Gaskin Nathan.
Thank you and good evening. It is a pleasure to be here with you all in this space and in this time. And I'm grateful and honored that my colleague and friend, Dr. Tony, is willing and able to have me be here in this space. And we all work, with one another through liberation health strategies, as well as through other ventures together through healing and wanting to help and support our communities and really wanting to help our folks embody health and wellness and see what that looks like. And a lot of that is through this social justice frame, but also about Black joy is also the big piece about this. So like, what does it mean to really embody this wellness and this joy within ourselves? Because that is also this key component to health and wellness that we often don't talk about is the joy piece of it. That the health is beyond just the numbers that come up in your labs. That's one piece of it, but there's all these other components. So I am joining you all this evening from my home. I live in Harlem, New York, in the Sugar Hill area.
Yeah.
And I am, yes, it's a historic Black area here where my family, my father's side immigrated here from the Caribbean, from St. Kitts. And my great grandfather actually came here and he was a labor organizer. And
Oh,
so he traveled around St. Kitts and he taught folks in the fields who were working how to read with my great aunt. And because that was something that was not appreciated by the folks that were in power. His life was threatened, and he had to come to New York for a bit of time. And he had befriended Marcus Garvey, and he was like, "You need to go back." And so he went back. Um, had a few more of my grandfather and some other great aunts before coming back to New York, again. But that work and that history, is in my family, and it's something that we're very proud of. And my father was a member of Union. He was worked for the Postal Service
Hmm.
throughout my whole childhood. Um, as well. And so for myself, coming to this work, just briefly to share my background of why I find this being so important, is that I came through nonprofit. So I, started as an AmeriCorps member, and my first summer job was working with a shelter for survivors of domestic violence.
Hmm.
And then I worked with the Children's Defense Fund. And through that work as a youth worker, and year after year, I myself and other colleagues started finding ourselves feeling burned out and needing to attend to our own health. And when I was working through the HIV and AIDS pandemic and epidemic, and realized just how much of it was taxing for us in doing all of that work, and seeing my colleagues in not just the organizations that I was working in, but also in our sister organizations as well, is that I was like, I need to do something different for myself and for my own well-being, but also my people need something else. And so I decided to, change careers, but it wasn't a total change into becoming a licensed massage therapist. And
Hmm.
in that, after becoming licensed, was like, how do I bring these worlds together? And so that's what brings me to this place now, where my work really is about spirituality and health. Is I never would have seen this happening, but a lot of my work consulting is done in multi-faith spaces. So a lot of my work is done with a multi-faith seminary here in Harlem, Auburn Seminary. And I work also with some churches in the area as well. And so this conversation around spirituality is important, because it is something that is so key and is a value for so many of our people, that it's this key piece to our overall health and wellness. And it really provides this opening to a bigger dialogue where people can really talk about their cultural values and their practices.
Mhm. Because I was going to ask you, and you rolled right into it, which is great. And I'm going to ask you to roll backwards again, too. Do it slow for some of us, okay?
Okay.
What exactly does spiritual have to do with our health? Because a lot of us, when we hear spiritual, we think the church stuff, or for some crazy people, they think, the spirits will come and get you. There is just so much confusion about the link between the spirit and the health uh, aspect of who we are as individuals. Help us with that. I'm going to take my face off so people can look directly at you as you explain this, okay?
Oh, I'm so glad I moisturized. Okay. I'm glad about that extra spritz of oil sheen and the moisture this morning. Okay. So, when we're talking about spirituality, we're often looking at that quality or kind of state of what it means to be spiritual. And that's different for each individual. And for some people, that may mean being a part of a religious organization. That may mean being a part of a church, being part of a synagogue, being part of a temple. But it's often about this attachment to some sort of religious values. But we have to take a step back from that spirituality and be like, what does it mean for people when they hear the word spirit? And the thing with spirit is that this is something that has multiple, definitions depending on the context. And
Mhm.
so you're right. For some people, there's spirit in terms of this animating principle, in terms of what gives life physically to organisms, to us as humans, to other things, right? And then there's also this sentient piece of spirit when we talk about a person or someone's spirit. Then we also talk about the sense of someone's soul when we talk about a person's spirit and what's within them as well. Or we also may talk about spirit in the terms of someone's attitude or their frame of mind, right? We'll be like, that person has a good spirit, right? So we may even place a value to someone's spirit or attribute particular things to one's spirit as well. And then we can't talk about spirit without also talking about soul. So we also know culturally for some of us, soul, we might be like, he got soul. So it might be like he got soul, like he's got moves, but there's also the soul in terms of like, a person's, body and the spiritual part within them. But also in many religions that it's this piece that we believe lives forever, that is beyond the physical body, beyond just this human form, beyond the cells, the skin, the bones, right? But it also can be a part of this kind of deeper moral and emotional nature that we have, as well as our ability to feel kindness and sympathy for other people, as well as our ability to appreciate beauty in the things that we see and feel around us as well. And then the larger piece that I think during this pandemic in particular, that people are starting to tune into even more, and we're starting to see a lot with younger people, is that for some folks that necessarily don't have a relationship with a actual physical structure or religious home, is that more people are identifying as spiritual in terms of something that's sacred to them. If it's a sacred practice, if it's sacred space. So it could be nature, it could be certain things that they're doing for themselves, or the way that we are adorning or treating our body is sacred in terms of referring to our body as a temple, for example.
Mhm.
So does that help in terms of context and framing?
Yeah, it does. It really does, because both words mean so many different things to people, but the connection, as you just laid out, really helps us to understand exactly what it is that you're talking about. I think that we are blessed with that kind of understanding internally, but externally it becomes a little crazy for us to be able to express it. And that's why we're so excited that you're here with us tonight to help us get to that place. Now, when we talk about spirit, when we talk about soul, we also have to talk about the physical, the mental, the emotional. And you tapped into that just a bit when you started talking about this pandemic. This has got to be the
Mhm.
craziest time that we have seen, with folks who are trying their best to hold on to every element of sanity that they have. And where they reach to in order to get it is the question. How do you get to that place that I watch you, I watch Tony, and many others like yourselves who practice this, tap into with such ease? Most of us are just stretching out and trying to figure out, okay, I want that. I want to be able to go to
Mhm.
that place. How do we get there?
Yeah. And I think the thing is the key word that you're saying is ease and practice, right? Those are two words that are really important to hone in on. So I, like many of people during the pandemic, got a pandemic puppy. But I'm a dog owner. I have had dogs for over a decade. And so this is my third dog. And my other dog passed away during the pandemic. So this wasn't like, oh my goodness, let's get a dog for the first time. But I start with this to talk about ease. So for anyone who has a pet, a four-legged pet, three-legged pet in terms of a dog or a cat, you may notice the first thing that they do in the morning that they get up is that they wake up and they stretch. And so my dog literally does the yoga move of a downward dog. So he wakes up and he stretches his body, and I hear him shake because he has his tags on in the morning. So I hear his collar, jiggle, and it's ease. He starts his day with ease. And it is a practice. And he does it every time he wakes up from a nap.
Mm.
Every time he's a puppy, he naps throughout the day. And all he does, he naps a lot. He terrorizes things, breaks and chews up everything, wakes up, stretches, and does it all over again, right? Eats a bunch of stuff, falls out, and repeat. But when we watch things in nature, right, there's certain things that they do with ease. If you ever take a little bit of time and watch a bird build a nest, it's a practice, and they do it with ease. And they take some time and some patience, and they're like, here's this thing I have to do. And it's just this natural flow. Now, I'll be fully transparent. For us, it's again a practice. And the thing about the word practice is there's power in that. When we say practice, then we know that it's lifelong. When you practice something, there is no mastery. You practice it for your entirety of your life. So there's going to be some days when I go to do a practice like meditation, or I decide that for me, one of my spiritual practices is that I keep and maintain an ancestor altar. So at night, I light a candle or I use an LED candle some nights. If I'm tired, I'm like, we're not playing with fire, so I'll light that instead. I do my, I do my prayers. If there's a particular prayer, my prayer list changes, especially during this pandemic. There's different family members, friends of family, that I'm praying for, then I have this practice. And some days I'm more clear and the words come out smoother than others. But it's a practice. Um, and some days it's easier. Some days I can do this meditation and I can be still and be like focused. And other days you can meditate and you're like, I need to go to Target. I think I'm out of dish soap. Should I go do the laundry? Is
Mm,
alternate side parking today or tomorrow? Because I don't remember what day of the week it is right now, right?
mhm.
So we're not perfect. In our squad, all of us as part of Liberation Health Strategies, and we all have our own separate like consulting and physical businesses as well. Like we all talk about this and text each other about it, and we will text and remind each other for things like, "Hey, did you drink water today?" Like we all know each other's thing. Like we are friends and to a deep level that we will share those vulnerabilities. So I know, for one person, their thing that they forget to do is drink water. I know another person's thing that they forget to do is eat a midday meal. So we know these different things about each other. So we have a text thread and we might check in with each other if we know someone's going through something for those things. So
Mhm,
practice and ease.
mhm.
Yes.
That helps a
There.
lot.
Yeah.
So the mental aspect that you mentioned just a little bit, all right? Um, the confusion that comes without having a practice of any kind. So that
Hmm.
it's always a get up, get with it, the constant running, the constant feeling like you're never completing anything. We have been able to see it more clearly through this environment that we're living in now than ever before. But very few of us know what
Yes.
to do about it. So as you were describing, your thread that you use to talk to the people that you're closest to and you know their practices, their habits, and their weaknesses, all right, for not taking care of self, that's vitally important. How is it then that when you're talking about the physical and the mental and the emotional piece all together, because all of that's going on at one time right now, that
All
you
of it. All of
yeah,
it.
yeah. How do you handle that so that it doesn't become something that's overwhelming, but that it's something that you can kind of take one bite at a time at in order to do the
Yeah.
real deal for getting better? Does that make sense to
I
you, what
think
I'm
the
asking
first thing
you?
is just that. No, that definitely that makes a ton of sense. I think the first thing is acknowledging just where you are, right? So it's like if you get, lost. I know for a lot of us, we probably haven't been in a mall in a long time, or it's been a minute. But if you're lost in a mall or an airport and you look for the kiosk and it's like you are here, right? The first step is taking an assessment of where you are. Now, the one thing, again, that's a bit powerful that we sometimes forget is everyone starts with, I don't have a practice. And I'm like, all of us have a practice, all of us have a ritual, and all of us have routines. Some of us have fallen into patterns of practices or patterns of rituals that are no longer serving us or aren't serving us to our highest potential or the vibration that we want. So even if it is, I wake up, I go to social media, 45 minutes later, I'm still on social media. I then go and I do this thing, and then my day just rolls, right? And it's like nothing's planned out. That's still a practice, and there's still a ritual. It
Mhm,
just may not be as conscious or intentional, but it's still, in fact, a practice. And so much so that your body and your brain, that it is woven and it is a track that your body and brain are like, this is what we do on Tuesday. And the next day, it's this is what we do on Wednesday. So if you're like, hey, I want to do something different, part of it is first acknowledging what is it that I'm currently doing. So that's part of the first piece. And that one of the things that's been so hard for so many of us is that this pandemic has been our harsh teacher, right? So we've had many teachers in our life. We've had the literal teachers that we've had throughout, primary and secondary schooling, and if we did additional schooling. And then we've had teachers in terms of different things that have happened to us in life, um, as well as different situations. And we've all learned a lot one way or another throughout this time. We're almost 2 years in, which is, it's a lot to even say that aloud. But I mean, in a couple of months, we will be 2 years into this.
Mhm.
And one of the big things that we have to give ourselves, again, some ease is that the body will take what it needs when we don't care for ourselves. I will say again, the body will take what it needs when we don't care for ourselves. So the body, and this is where I'll get a little nerdy in my teacher world from massage therapy, but it's like the body's goal is best it can is to maintain homeostasis. And just all that means is that the body is trying to reach this equilibrium, and it's never going to reach it entirely. And in Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, which is also a part of what we teach at the school I teach at, it's, we talk about a balance of yin and yang, or yin and yang, depending on whom you're speaking with. But the body's going to attempt to achieve it as best it can. And sometimes what happens is we keep pushing and pushing our body. And because it's going to keep trying to get that balance, we think we're fine because the body's trying to do the best it can to maintain it. So it's like, cool, you only gave me 5 hours of sleep. All right, I'm going to keep going. Oh, you only gave me 4.5 hours of sleep. All right, I'll see what I can do to like make you keep working the next day. And you keep pushing it and you keep pushing it and you keep pushing it. But eventually, sometimes we're going to get sick. Sometimes you're going to oversleep because the body is going to take that time back. And then we beat up on ourselves for like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I missed this meeting, or I can't believe I'm late for this. And it's like, well, we kept taking away from the body and thinking it wasn't going to take back what it needed. And so when it keeps not being enough, the body will catch up. And, for those of us, in attendance, think about, have you ever had your body call its own timeout?
Mhm. Mhm.
Right? Have you ever had your body when you're just like, I got to go out of town. I got to go to this meeting. I got this big conference coming up. I have this thing happening. And your back's like, I'm about to go into spasm. Or you get some cold, or you're, whatever. And most of the time, right, your body doesn't pick a day of the week or a time when you have time for it, right? It doesn't pick a convenient time. It just does it. It's like, oh, time out, I'm done. And that's what happens, right? So in terms of that physical, and this I think really leads it to the piece of kind of around our physical, mental and emotional health, is that our physical wellness is really how close are we to this like functioning of the body at all levels, so that all the biological processes that help with our survival, reproduction, our various organ systems are functioning, optimally. Then we have our emotional wellness, which is about how we think and how we feel and our overall sense of well-being and what's our ability to cope with the life events and things that come up. And then we have our social wellness, which definitely during the pandemic, people recognize just how important that was. And maybe for some of us, because we were so caught up with work, didn't realize just how much that mattered in particular, right? That social wellness and that connection with others. And that's really defined by our ability to interact, meaningfully and to be able to form relationships with other people, and how well are we able to adapt, in community with our people.
Mhm. Well, that really does give us a good round picture of, what is health when we talk about all three of those aspects: physical, mental, and emotional. But I want to tap one for a couple of reasons. Our young folks have seen death and dying in a way that they never really have before. And older people have had to adjust to losing folks that they thought they would have to see them through, so they felt vulnerable. It's become a time where the certainty of life, lifespan, uh, outside of even health, physical health, but mental health has become way, way important for folks to be able to deal.
Mhm.
And what do you say to a child who's lost a parent, or to a parent who has lost a child, which is even more devastating, or to friends who've been friends for life and yet they're only 35 or 40 years old, and all of a sudden that, ride or die is no longer there? Those are impactful moments that people are really struggling on how to adjust to. You expect things at certain periods of your life. This disease has really wiped that platform away from our area of expectation. How do we comfort one another during these times? Or what should we say? Or how should we even act?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the first things is first just recognizing and giving space for the grief itself. One of the things that's been hard for so many people about this pandemic, and especially when you are looking at and talking about Black folks and communities of color, is a compounded grief. And so, for some of us, and I think when New Year's hit, for 2020, and then you start getting kind of the year in review with the news, and then folks being like, oh my goodness, I forgot that even happened this year, because you just thought about all the things that had happened just for you personally. And then you think about all the things that happened nationally and internationally that were even separate from COVID, but happened during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, and so there's the compounded grief that happened where so many of us didn't have time to grieve just one loss before the next loss came, before the next loss came. Um, and I, even for personally, I know that that happened, for myself and for my family, of losing multiple family members, some directly from COVID. And then I think a lot of people, especially it was some of the older folks, that people were lost where we aren't yet attributing it to COVID, but with the shutdowns and the isolation, that a lot of our people died of things that were attributed to other health conditions, but they weren't getting proper care. So when you look at the technology and the things that were being used to supplement healthcare, I know for a fact, some of my aunts and uncles who passed, and great aunts and uncles, they weren't going to Zoom with their doctors. That wasn't something that was feasible for them. And even
That's
if a
right.
cousin or someone was going to show up and try to help them do that, that wasn't something they felt comfortable doing. There's no way they got parallel care
Mhm.
during that time. So it's like for folks who passed of other health conditions during that time, it's like, how's that not COVID related? Right. So that's a whole nother conversation. In grief, but also grief and anger as well, that a lot of people are dealing with grief and in anger because of what happened, um, in terms of treatment, lack of treatment, proper treatment. Then there's also the issues around survivor's guilt that some folks are having that we still haven't had a large conversation about. So, when you have families where multiple people got COVID, one or two family members passed away, and then the other people, cleared the virus and survived it.
Mhm.
I haven't seen too many places where there's even been conversations to hold that. So one of the first things I would say is first having the space to have the conversations to talk about and hold, just the fact that the grief is there,
Mhm.
acknowledge that there's compounded grief, and that often what happens with people of color, and especially when we talk about people from targeted communities, I do not like the word marginalized communities, because Black and brown bodies, when we talk about lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender folks are targeted. Our communities are targeted. We are not vulnerable. We are targeted specifically through institutionalized and structural racism, and that's very different. And when we look at that, we don't, at that framing in that way, we recognize the power that we have within our communities, but also call out what's happening in terms of what's being put upon us as well. And
Mhm.
so some of the conversations that you spoke about, in terms of talking about the impacts of environmental racism and other things, that also puts the onus on some of the other folks in terms of what they've done for us to
Mhm.
even be here, that disproportionately also affected our communities, that there were already things in terms of health disparities that put us more at risk for this virus in terms of how it attacked the various organ systems of the body as well. So the other piece I would say too is, acknowledging those breaking points that we've all had around our grief, connecting people to other people who have had loss. So is it support groups? Is it, what are the resources and pieces of strength within the community around this? The other piece, it could be going back to some of the spirituality, but also, of course, support around mental health and mental health that's culturally competent.
Mm-hmm.
And culturally specific, which is needed for a lot of our people, and especially for our young people. Some conversations, of course, are happening this week in terms of the government and the impact of social media around the algorithms and things of Facebook. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's something that we have to pay attention to as well. And that there's also the conversation that happened earlier in the pandemic about the impact of hate speech, that it also correlates with that and how that was also affecting our young people and their mental health. So I would say that there's that piece. So we have what's called disenfranchised grief, because often our losses aren't given the same press and the same weight. And we've seen that just now, with the difference in press with missing women. We had, the young Caucasian woman, where we have literally hundreds of women of
Yeah.
color whom are missing, and they don't get anywhere near the airtime or any airtime at all in any of the major outlets. So all of those things, I think, are part of the beginning of the conversation. I don't have a quick soundbite, so I'm not going to pretend to give one. So I don't want to say that I'm ignoring that, but I'll be honest.
No.
There isn't a good quick one. But I think the first thing is telling our young people that we see them and that we hear them.
Yes.
Letting them know that we're here for them, and then making sure that we connect them to the right resources depending on the type of grief and loss that they're going through, be it if it's a parent, be it if it's something that's about violence, related to violence in the community, or something related to the pandemic in terms of directly being impacted by loss from the virus.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And I especially, excuse me, I especially heard what you were saying as well about the difference in the treatment of our mental health. Um, not the not the way that we go and get care for it, but the way they will guilt a community like ours to
Mhm.
make us believe it is our fault for some of the things that happen to us, and that happens on a wide scale. And it's sometimes so slick and so smooth, we don't even see it. So a
Yeah.
piece of that is what I was hoping that you would bring out, and you did. I thank you for that. I see now that there are
Okay.
questions in the chat box that are being asked.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. I've seen, okay, let's go now. Good evening. Oh, hey, Jeff, I see that you're saying hello. From, okay, I think this is Velda in Jacksonville, maybe. How do you comfort children
Okay.
who lose more than one loved one at the same time, like a mother and a grandmother, which is a double hit to the soul
Mhm.
and heart of a family? And how do we do that? That's Velda in Miami who asked that question. Thank you, Velda, for your question.
Yeah. So first, thank you for your question, and also that just first acknowledging the impact to as a caregiver, and sorry for the loss of someone directly in your family, but also in your community as well. Again, I think the big piece in terms is getting them connected to someone who is a mental health professional is key. So someone who is certified and knows how to support a young person in terms of child therapy, and then child and family therapy if someone in the family is the caregiver now for them as well. Because you have the issue too of, if a caregiver is a family member, they're also processing that loss then of the sister or mother or however else they were related, and then also having to care for this child. And how do you hold space for both? So how do they deal with their grieving, but then also they're now in this role of caregiving for this child? And we know, unfortunately, because of this virus and also the other things that have been going on during the pandemic, that families lost multiple generations at once or very close together.
Mhm,
And so that's something that is key.
mhm.
and making sure that that happened. And then also, if possible, getting them connected in terms of either support group with other young people around their age that have also gone through a similar loss. It may not be that they necessarily have lost both a grandparent and parent at the same time, but definitely for a parent, we just know that there's lots of research out there about the impact of losing a parent at a young age and what that can do for someone throughout the rest of their lives. So just making sure that they have the appropriate folks to talk to outside of the family or the immediate circle that's around them, as well as making sure that the adults that are around them have the right support as well.
Whew, it's a heavy topic, and what you
Yes.
all do lift the spirit through the controlled patterns, practices, and the realization that you have to take the time out in order to allow the body to catch up, or it will take it back itself.
Yeah.
But some folks understand exactly what's going on, but either they choose not to do the self-healing
Mhm.
because they don't know what that would mean for the rest of their responsibility with family, with work, with whatever, and they
Yeah.
continue to go on. Or others will not take care of themselves because they are afraid of the stigma that goes along with taking care of your mental spirit, that goes along with your eternal spirit, that goes along certainly with your emotional spirit. It shows up whether we believe it or not, but people can see it visibly, almost instantly, in the difference in your character. How do we convince our folks culturally that it's okay to admit to needing the help, that it's okay that you will have those conversations and that you will get stronger? How do you get people to that place? And how can we practice some of what you do, not as a professional, but as a caregiver in another whole area where we have not done that kind of support for a very
Yeah.
long time?
I think just more of us being more transparent about our own um, not just struggles, but our own journeys.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of it is the language, right? And it's like semantics and words do matter. I'm going to try not to go down the rabbit hole of my soapbox, but I was just talking with a close friend of mine is a family and child therapist. And I was telling her, one of the biggest disservices that I feel like exists is the fact that we even call it mental health, because the reality is that if it's emotional health, just like we have cardiovascular health, just like we have, nutrition and other types of health, it's just one other type of health. And the piece is that we all have emotions and we all have a nervous system, we all have a brain, we all have neurotransmitters, which is and hormones, and those things all affect our emotional well-being. And so we therefore all have mental health. And I think that framing of these mental health issues, and that there's different diagnoses, and we do know that. And I think that there's certain mental health conditions that people do, in fact, yes, have for life. But I think the part of the big kind of elephant in the room or hurdle is that life is life, and people are go through times when we are depressed, and through times when there's anxiety and different things, and there's grief and there's loss, and that's real. And that the process that one goes through to heal and deal with those things is that everything's tied to diagnosis because of billing often. But we're not able to have a conversation about what does it mean for people to get support for their health, in terms of their emotional well-being. So if we talk about emotional health and move away from the stigma around the language when we talk about mental health, how
Mhm.
would that free things up for people to then seek proper care? But the other reality is that there's also a shortage of culturally competent therapists. That, therapists of color and Black therapists are swamped right now. And because of billing, there's a lot of Black therapists that don't deal with billing. Like, I know in New York, talking to friends, that people are like paying out of pocket, and
Yep.
you know people can barely afford. They're literally having to make these hard decisions like, well, I could have a car, or I could go to therapy, or I could have this, or I could do therapy. Or they're just sacrificing. They're like, well, I could do it once a month. And so how do you, access services that are more affordable and more accessible? But also some of it too is we need more people in the field. And so it's coming at it from different angles. So it is having the conversation. It is when we're talking to kids about what they want to be when they grow up, talking to them about that's a possibility, right? So not just, hey, do you want to be a doctor or a lawyer? Like those aren't the only two professions, or
Yeah.
professor or athlete, right? We need more people in the field, and that's something that takes time, right? All the schooling and things people need to go through. And then also having more access. And so some of that too is starting to happen with more of the apps that exist. So there's BetterHelp, there's Talkspace, and those do cost. But some people are utilizing that who don't want to deal with the traditional model of having to deal with billing and dealing with their insurance. And then depending on the states that people live in, like in New York, in New York City, we have NYC Thrive. And so there is ways for people to access things that are a little more affordable or accessible, but it's still a ways to go. Yeah.
You've got another one here that says,
Yeah.
thank you for that. What do you suggest for young children under the age of 12 that are stressed because they can't come into contact with their friends and family due to COVID restrictions? They hear it on TV, they hear it from other folks. Well, you got to stay in, you got to stay safe, you got to wear the mask, you got to do this and that. But the signs are there that they need a little bit more than that. What do you suggest for young children under the age of 12?
Yeah, I think with young children, it really is going to be a family by family decision that people make. Being in New York, where we were hit really hard earlier in the pandemic, and have had then we also had our waves earlier, different friends addressed it in different ways. So some friends with children decided to pod up very early. So they decided, that they'll partner up with one or two families, and if they were able to get tested, they got tested on whatever regular basis. And then they decided we're going to take this minimal or this amount of risk. And this way our children are able to socialize. That's something that people need to talk about with, their healthcare providers, and you have to do a risk assessment, right? What is the risk? You have to look at, everyone in the household, what are people's health conditions? How much do you trust the other family, even if it's family you're related to? So even if it's a family you're related to, but they live outside of the home and it's another household, and then how much do you feel and trust that the people are going to kind of adhere to what your rules are going to be? So, not just when you all are together, but how much are they engaging out in the community, depending on where you live and what the numbers are in terms of social outlets. As well, because there's this huge impact in terms of the need for socialization, as well as a massage therapist. One of the big things we've talked about during the pandemic is the need for touch. A term that people kind of cringe on, but it's called skin hunger. People need touch. They physically need touch. Yeah. It's something that most people crave. And when we don't get it, there are real life implications, and anxiety is one of them, stress, lack of sleep, impacts. And so trying to figure out what that looks like, and having to do a risk assessment and decide from there, if is potting an option, is there some other way that you want to engage in talking, with the pediatrician or other health folks about what could be some possibilities.
I tell you, the questions are rolling in, and they really are right to the point, because here's one that says, thank you for the information, but I'm in what seems like a continuous cycle of grief due to death from COVID-19, other health issues, and the opioid epidemic. And within that same frame, I'm going to pair one that came from one of the organizers in South Dade, who said that they've lost teachers and other staff. And each time that they visit the school, someone is sharing a loss at the school due to COVID. The lack of counselors in the school make it so difficult for educators to comfort the students, but it also makes it hard for them to comfort each other. So it's just loaded. It's just
Yeah.
low. And I keep asking you, what do we do? How do we say it? And you're giving us very good answers. You're giving us very good answers. So that simply says a couple of things. Inside of us, we've got answers that we know, but it's so overwhelming. It's how do you put it out there?
Hmm.
It's overwhelming because it's continuous. That's what some of our folks are saying. We put it out there because the answer that we know and understand still begs a question on the next day and the next day after that and the next day after that.
Yeah.
Oh, are you up to answering a couple of more?
Yeah, I will, I will try my best. Like I say with my students, I'll try my best and we'll try our best to, figure it out. I think the big thing, I'll say this while people, before anyone starts, people start kind of dropping out, is visibility and acknowledgement. Like when you don't know what to say, first off, the biggest thing is that people want to be seen and be heard and just holding space for another person. So often, part of what just compounds and adds to the pain of grief and loss
Mhm.
is the invisibility. And so when you have to acknowledge that for all of us, especially, Black and Brown folks, and then when you add in the intersectionality of the other ways that we may identify in terms of orientation, in terms of disability, in terms of class, in terms of all these different things, right? There's so many different ways that we aren't seen, heard, and acknowledged in this world. And in social media and these other things just make that even worse often. And so when this grief is happening, grief is isolating, right? Grief feels like it literally is taking your voice box out and you feel like you're the only one, even if you're around other people who lost the same person, because each individual processes that grief so different, and I just lost a friend suddenly a week ago. I'm going somewhere that I'm a little nervous to go. That COVID numbers aren't great, but I need that closure. Speaking with the other friends as a friend of 20 years. I'm in my 40s. They're only 41, like they were only 41 like I am. And it's a shock. I'm still processing it. I have not gotten much done this past week. Like, I'll be honest. It's, and each time it happens, it's been a lot of loss during this time. And then we also, depending on where we live during the pandemic, have had all these collective losses too of just what's going on in our cities. So even just living in New York, I didn't go anywhere during the pandemic. A lot of people fled the city. So it was, ghost town around here. So my neighborhood is usually hustling and bustling. Nothing, crickets. You only saw people who had animals outside and people who were essential workers, and that was it. And so I think that's the big piece. And then the other piece is just having the conversations and also acknowledging I don't have magic words. So if it's a child or if it's an adult, like I don't know what to say, but I'm here.
Yes.
I don't have the magic words, but I'm here. Is that place to start? Um, and in terms of, needing to explain things to children, in terms of quarantining and them not being able to understand, why they can't go home. We want to make sure, and I would say this is where some of the CDC information is hopeful, that they do have stuff around how to, and let me just look here, I'll pull up a resource about this. That there is some information about how to kind of talk to children about what's age appropriate to share. Here we go. Let me see if this works in the chat. And I'll answer that.
I
Now,
see.
one of these is specific to New York, but it actually gives a guide. I will say New York City because, again, where we were in the pandemic. This gives a guide about how to speak to children about COVID, and it starts as low as age 2. Um,
Okay.
so that's that resource. Because I want to acknowledge I saw you talking about your grandson who's 6, and I'm sorry, that is a lot to hold. And then there's 2 more I want to share with you, and another one for absence, because it
Please.
looks like there are a lot of you. The other thing to acknowledge that I saw in the chat is that um it's unfortunate, but it's real that the opioid and meth use is going up in the Black community across the country. And more stats and information is starting to come out about that, but there's not a lot of press. A lot of the press has been about how it's been impacting European Americans and white folks. And so there's starting to be some information, but for those of us on the streets and on the ground, we know that it's in our neighborhoods and that it's going up. So I think that that's another thing on top of COVID and all the things that were going on before COVID even hit. So the 3 resources that I just shared, because several of you talked about how to speak with young people about COVID, about how to explain, having to quarantine or why they need to be separated from family members. Those 3 articles speak to that a bit. And so one of them specific is from New York City, but it will still be helpful for you all. And then another one's from the Center for Disease Control, and then the other one's from the World Health Organization.
I don't
As
want
well.
us to miss the piece that was dropped into the chat earlier
So I
on.
hope that
Okay,
at
sorry.
least helps kind of as a starting point.
Okay. There was also a piece that you dropped into the chat earlier that addresses mental health resources for Black people trying to survive in the country. That's at the top of
Yes.
the chat, folks, so please don't miss that. Also, the piece about our National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network, that should also be pulled down, and therapy that liberates, that should also be pulled down so that you will be able to see that and utilize the help, because we all know that especially trans within the African American community became a target that was almost like sport for some folks around COVID and other times of stress. So please don't lose that information from the chat. You need to do a pull down of all of that that's there. Let's see. I see Reverend Linda Green is on as well. I'm trying to help with my no tech self. Carly, you can see I'm trying to pull down some of this stuff if I can for you. Uh-oh, she's frozen. Dave,
Let's see. Carla, do you still have audio?
she's frozen.
Okay, there
Oh,
she is.
Oh
She's back.
no, that's not good. How about, are you
Yep.
able to hear me?
Yep, we're
now
able
we
to hear
can.
you. Yep, it's catching up.
Are, Now you can?
Yes.
Okay, and you can hear me okay now? Okay. Sorry about that. So I think I just missed your last question. Just want to make sure I got that, and then I was just getting caught up what was in the chat here.
The last piece that I was raising for folks not to miss was the portion that you dropped into the chat about the 44 mental health resources that were there for Black people trying to survive in the country. That's at about 634 in the chat room so that you can pull that down, along with the National Queer and Trans Therapists of Color Network, as well as therapy that liberates. All 3 of those are linked together around the 634 time slot in the chat so that folks can access that as well. Okay, we lost Carla one more time.
All right. And then I also just put a couple of national hotlines, because the other thing with doing this, holding space for ourselves, for our beloveds, is that sometimes it's just too much, and that we have to acknowledge that, and that there are national hotlines that we either may need to use for ourselves, or we may need to refer a family member or a friend, or colleague to, as well. And so I just wanted to put that in the chat as well. and just to kind of help give a, a start. And then I will put there's a ton of apps, but I will just put 3 of them that at least have some good free content for people who do want to start with either some mindfulness or meditation, um, to just start to help with the some of the anxiety and some of the stress, or to start with a practice or ease. And the thing that I will add with that is that with meditation, there's no one way or perfect way to meditate. And also to acknowledge that even the Dalai Lama himself, things pop up for him when he meditates. Meditate is not a magical, when you do it nothing pops up. Like, our brain, that's its job, that it things are supposed to come up, we are supposed to think about things. But as you develop a practice, it's, oh, hey, I noticed this thought, like, make a note for that and I'll deal with that later. It doesn't mean you're able to like sit, you're having this Zen moment and nothing ever comes to mind. Things will come to mind. That doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong. The other thing is, there's different ways to meditate. So some people are able to meditate and they're able to do it with just silence or with a periodic bell. Some people are able to do it, but it works for them with music. Other people, it works, but they want to do it guided, meaning that they're doing it with some sort of voice guided, either an app or a CD or something, or even the body position. It may be you're able to kind of slow down your mind better if you're lying down versus sitting. So it's something that, again, is a practice, in terms of figuring out kind of what works for you as well.
Wow, the basket that you started putting resources in, plus the conversation that you shared with us this evening, is full and so appreciated. It really is. A lot of times we are shy and don't want to talk about the hard topics, but you laid it out so that there was room for an ease into the questions that were there that sometimes do not get articulated out loud. I want to mention also that you included for us information on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That's there, as well as the domestic violence piece, as well as the Safe Horizon domestic violence piece. All of that is invaluable to our community because we're kind of slow on talking about these topics. But Carla, you brought it tonight for us to really just take the time to think about the impact that all of this has brought to us right in our faces, to figure out what next, where we're going. How do we deal, as the last question I'm going to put on you because there's only 4 minutes left. How do we deal with the constant impact of news that tells us how crazy and dangerous it is? And how do we deal with that, especially with there being so many avenues for folks to get information and misinformation? How do we check on one another with that kind of stuff? Does that take us back to the first part of your presentation, knowing our circle of friends and family well? Or are we supposed to be on a special watch to help us deal with this and to help others as we go along the way? Okay, I think we lost her again.
Yeah.
Are you there, Carla?
I think the big thing is us, who are your people? It may be family, it may be friends, it may be colleagues. For some of us, it may be connecting with people who are loosely strangers. Sometimes that's easier. That's sometimes where social media or some of the apps can be used for good, where it may be easier for people who you
Yeah, I think we did lose her this time. We did think we maintained audio the last couple times, but I think we lost her this time.
Okay, we lost her this time.
Yeah, I think so.
There are weather events that are happening all up and down the East Coast right now. And New York is one of the targeted cities. So we probably lost her as a result of that. Let me just say, and I hope she's able to hear this if she can't see us. that what she brought to us tonight was really incredible. It was an easy way into the conversation for us to do a deeper dive as we go along with more direct questions verbally that comes from the audience. There she is, that comes from the audience directly to the presenter. And I hope, Carla, that you'll be able to come back to us again. We like the way you present. I hope you can hear us. Well, you look good on camera.
Apologies for
I'll tell
that.
you
I
that.
got
You
kicked
look
out of Zoom
good.
for a second. Yeah, sorry about that. I got kicked out of Zoom for a second. I'm back.
That's
I
all
was like,
right.
and I'm gone. I'm back again. So I think I was just answering your last question in terms of how do we connect and have people to check in with? Was that okay? Um, so it's just sharing that, it could be something where social media may be beneficial if we wanted to connect with people whom we aren't as close with. For some of us, that's helpful, where we may feel like we're able to share a bit more of the areas where we may need additional support. For other folks, it may be directly connecting with friends or people in our communities. It could be our faith-based communities. It could be colleagues, where it could be as simple as having a text thread that we have with a small group of friends, and just saying, hey, this week, there's this hard meeting going on, or this week there's this hard transition, that there's something I'm working on. Could you check in with me twice a day and remind me, like, hey, did you eat lunch? Or hey, did you, take a minute to stretch? For each of us, it's going to be a different thing. And the big thing is, practice is about what is the practice that you want to embrace or engage in. Same thing for rituals. So for some of us, the word ritual may fit, and for other people, we may want to use the word practice. And the big thing is not trying to add too many new things at once. It's just like if you're cooking and you're starting to do something new and you want to change a recipe and you're trying to kind of stick to the recipe, but you don't want to add 6 new things the first time you're cooking the recipe. You might add 1 or 2 new things. So, not changing it up too much. And then try different things out. So try something for a while, and if it doesn't feel like a fit, then you might want to swap something out or adjust it. Recognizing, just like with shoes, where one pair of shoes could be the perfect fit for one person and for you it's not. And giving yourself, grace around that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I thank you. We
Yeah.
all thank you for your
Um,
time this evening, and know that you have a standing invitation to come back anytime at all, and share with us those things that help us through. You made us realize tonight
right.
that sometimes it is so vitally important just to pick up the phone and say to someone that you really care about, I just wanted to hear your voice, and it will make the difference. It will make the difference. Thank you, Carla. We appreciate you immensely. And thank you, Dave
Well,
and Brother
thank
Mason,
you.
all of you. Go ahead, Carla. Go ahead, Carla. I stepped on your word. Sorry.
All right. So I just wanted to say in closing, just thank you so much. Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to say again, thanks so much for spending some time this evening with me. Again, just let things evolve. Don't let that which is supposed to help you with your healing let you feel bound or feel stressed. And that harmony is just that part of like creating, towards your goal, and know that the definition for you might change. And then accept not knowing, that we don't have all the answers. And then practice curiosity is, I think, the big piece to this in terms around the healing work, for yourself and for your loved ones. And then again, just be easy with yourself and
Mm.
practice compassion, not just for your loved ones, but for you as well. That none of us are experts in this.
So
Thank
true.
you.
Thank you so very much. And thank all of you who tuned in. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week for another segment of Everything Health. Thank you so very much. Ah. Keep looking, Carly. You're getting your thank you there in this chat.
right. I'm sorry, Miss Brown. I forgot I am not the host. You are the host. But that concludes our show. But thank you so much, Carla. Thank you so much, President Brown. And Miss Brown, you can end the meeting, and that will close us out.
Okay, thank you very much,
All
Dave.
right,
Good
thank
night,
you.
everybody. Good job.
All right.
Good job. Good job.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. You're amazing. Take good care. Bye-bye.
Take care.